Hey, Bastish here for 64K and welcome to another episode of New Retro. And if you've never watched this series before, then I take a look at a new retro game on an old system, and then we also have a look at the inspiration game, the game that might have inspired it. And today's games are... And welcome back. So let's first take a look at the original version of the game. Supremacy, or Overlord as it's known in North America, was released in 1990, originally designed for the Amiga and Atari ST. The game was developed by the team at Probe, with publishing done by Virgin Games. This was an amazing game when it came out, a strategy game that had a unique visual and audio flair, two things that were almost never present in this genre of game during this period at least. It stood out and was a game even if the genre wasn't your style, you just had to respect. The goal of the strategy game is to conquer a group of planets in a certain sector of space and keep control of them. You're up against an opposing force who is trying to do the same, which leads to all-out planetary war. Both you and your opponent get to choose a starting planet in the sector. It's then basically a race to colonize the world before moving on to the next one until the whole sector is under your control. And of course you have to eliminate your opponent to reign supreme. There was tons of strategy involved and management aspects to the game that had you terraforming planets, keeping food supplies flowing, taxing the citizens, farming and mining for cash to buy troops and ships. There is a lot to do and it seems a bit daunting the first time you play it, but it's still way more accessible than most games of this style, just due to the visual flair and the great icon-based menu system. All this leads to battles as you move from planet to planet, conquering worlds until you take out your opponent's home base. The game was worked on by some of the best talents the UK gaming scene has ever seen. We had David Perry and Nick Bruti on design. They also worked on Earthworm Jim and MDK together. Graphics saw the likes of Hugh Riley and Paul Doherty work on various versions of the game, having both worked on multiple classic System 3 games. And of course, one of the most memorable aspects is the absolutely excellent soundtracks provided by Sid Master Jerome Tell and David Whittaker on the Atari ST version. It was a dream team of talent and the end product definitely shows. The C64 version, which was released in 1991, was something I played to absolute death and was every bit as good as its 16-bit big brothers as far as I'm concerned. It also received a 91% overall in Zap 64's issue number 74, and CU Amiga gave the Amiga version 93% overall. It was a game that represented the best the genre had to offer and still plays every bit as good now as it ever did. And now let's check out the brand new release. And now let's take a look at Supremacy, the 30th Anniversary Edition, which was released in November 2021 on the C64. This new version of the excellent Commodore 64 port has been lovingly updated and enhanced by the cracking group Access to celebrate the game's 30th anniversary. There truly was an epic amount of time and effort gone into this project, and I was lucky enough to speak with Mike Robertson, aka Knight Rider, of the group, and he'll be giving us a behind-the-scenes play-by-play of the entire update. And I'll now let him introduce himself.
My name is Mike Robertson, also known as Knight Rider, from the German cracking group Access. I have been a member since 2017. I was recruited as a sort of newly active senior in 2017. Historically, I started on the Commodore 64 probably around 1983, 1984 when I was at school. 1988, I would say, I upgraded to an Amiga and totally forgot about the C64. And then I remembered when I was sort of a teenager, I like to dabble on the sort of cracking scene and try to relearn what I'd long forgotten. I made some trainers just for myself and uploaded them to CSDB, and then obviously the other crackers in the current scene took an interest. One of the things which they encouraged me to do, which obviously no one else was doing at the time, was to look at easy flash releases. Easy flashes gives you about 1 megabyte of additional memory, more or less, for the Commodore 64. The loading times are significantly faster. For people who are very, very impatient like me, it's a great improvement.
My introduction to Supremacy was actually through a bootleg version I got in 1991, which I got directly from the group Hotline, who did one of the many cracks of this game. My next door neighbor and myself played this game a lot. Despite not having the instructions, we were able to figure it out and sunk endless hours into it. I asked Mike what ultimately made them decide to update Supremacy.
During the COVID lockdown, we were all at home. There was no way for us to meet. Anyway, we all geographically live relatively far away from each other, so we would have maybe one time a month or one time every 6 weeks, we would have a virtual pub meeting, and during the pub meeting, that's when Alex, also known as Retro Loser, came up with the concept Supremacy or Overlord, and how this was his favourite game, and he would really like to see some improvements made.
So besides Access's new trainer menu, which gives you the ability to select from a host of cheats if you're just no good at the game, and a pretty great helpful instruction manual as well, I asked Mark about some of the actual updates to the core of the game that the team made.
Loading and saving instead of loading to disk. The save state is so big it took absolutely ages to load and save. The second thing that he particularly felt was missing is there was one screen where you choose the current warrior. On the Amiga version, there were different warriors that could be selected. On the C64 version, it was fixed from the moment you actually choose your opponent. I cracked the game from original disk. I cracked initially the Overlord version, NTSC version, and sort of made some presentations about what potentially could be done. The HAL version was called Supremacy, and Alex kindly posted me the Supremacy disc, the original, and I cracked that. I disassembled it. I found out all of the pieces of code which were particularly interesting for me, and I said to Alex, okay, sort of what's the requirement? And then we went through and we talked in detail, and he said, okay, the Amiga has a fantastic intro which is clearly missing. There are certain screens which could really benefit from animation. It will give the atmosphere and so on a little bit more depth. So then I went together in sort of doing a sort of a proof of concept, proved that yes, this could be done. The animations could be built into the system, and that's when the two graphic artists came into play. So we have Salt, he's from Hungary, also known as SCSC. He did all of the spaceships and things like this. Did an absolutely fantastic job. He said to us he's never drawn a spaceship before in his life, and came up with the fantastic spaceships that we have there, and the terraformer and things like that. And then Domingo from Spain, he's also known as Almighty God. He came up with the animations for the soldier. He drew the weapons. He came up with some of the frames for the different walls and the levels. Salt, he also did some additional work. The animation for the intro. That for me was sort of a totally new world. I'd never really particularly done any animation on the C64 in terms of software sprites, because that's basically what it is. There's so much animation going on, you can't use hardware sprites. So I came up with a sort of a proof of concept with that, and it worked relatively well.
The amount of work that went into this, especially detail-wise, is pretty exceptional. Also, if you happen to have a C64 mouse, it's also now compatible with this device to get that game one more step closer to the Amiga Big Brother version. And that new intro is particularly awesome, which made me curious as to how long did the team actually work on this update for.
We've been working on it a long time. Some of the projects came in the meantime. For example, the fantastic bug fix version, the dual version of Time Soldier, which I actually did. Initially this came as a request on forum64.de. Someone said the loading times are pitiful, which of course they are. Can you make it as an easy flash version? Which I did very quickly, but however, during playtesting of the game was very hastily put together, had many bugs, and of course when you're creating a dual version, you want to eliminate all those bugs.
With Access updating so many classic games, particularly in the last decade, I was curious if they'd ever reached out to the original teams or creators to see if they'd be willing to participate or get their blessing on the versions they were now creating.
We actually reached out to David Perry, the developer of the Amiga version of the software. He very kindly provided us a zip file with many assets in there. One of them was even called Source. As I mentioned previously, I moved from the Commodore 64 to the Amiga. In the Amiga scene, I was a cracker there. It's a lot more complicated than the 6502 opcodes, so I decided I don't really want to relearn 68,000 assembly language to maybe get a few tips, which I can probably a lot easier, a lot faster get from the disassembly of the C64 game. We also pestered like hell, droned hell. Eventually he replied to us. Eventually we convinced him that the 30-year anniversary version of Supremacy was coming out, and he would potentially do a rendition of the intro music. He did actually agree, but unfortunately that's all we ever heard from him again was his agreement. We sent him many reminders, asked him what the status is, asked him if we could help. We tried to persuade him with videos and clips of how we were progressing. Unfortunately that didn't work, and we had to get 2 other SID composers or SID musicians to assist.
It's overall another outstanding release, and I'd recommend it to anyone who played and loved this back in the day to check it out. I'll leave a link in the description for you to download it. I also did a video on the update of Turbo Outrun, so if you're interested in that, check that out as well. And here's Mark on his overall thoughts on the project.
XS, our motto is more than you deserve. I often say it, often with a little poke of irony. I enjoy my hobby, it's great fun. It's not more than you deserve, but we love to say it nevertheless. I'm really appreciating any feedback that I get via Facebook, via CSDB, when people leave nice comments that they really enjoy playing the games, the software and so on, which me and the team developed together. Behind me as well is the XS team. We have some really good testers. All our profiles are there on CSDB. You can look us all up. I don't take credit at all for the Supremacy release. I'm just one small cog in the machine. I'm the guy who did probably the easiest part, which was the programming. All the creative stuff was done by Alex Retroluzor. It's his passion, and the graphics and the sound were done by other guys. There's a skill and a competence or an art which I simply don't have, and I thank them very much. A long, hard slog. At the end of the day, it's a hobby. We all have wives, children's, jobs, other things to do as well. So yeah, so to dedicate so much energy and passion and love, it's fantastic. So this is Knight Rider signing out. Goodbye. It's more than you deserve.
So if you've never played Supremacy before, it's an excellent strategy game for the C64. In fact, it's arguably one of the best. Extremely well balanced, and by this genre standards, very easy to get into and enjoy. And if you're going to play it, you might as well play this excellent version. And that's it for another episode. Thanks for joining me, Bastish B at 64K. I hope you had a good time. And if you can like and subscribe, that'll be greatly appreciated. I'll see you next time. Cheers.